The moment an avoidant couple realizes they're drifting apart, there's a strange kind of silence that creeps into certain relationships. Not the peaceful kind, but the kind that feels heavy, like a curtain slowly falling between two people. For avoidant couples, this silence isn't just an accident. It's the product of years or months of emotional evasion, small withdrawals, and unspoken fears. And the moment they realize they're drifting apart is rarely explosive. It's not a fight. It's not one big betrayal. It's often a quiet, almost invisible shift, so subtle that it can take months before they both admit it's even happening. That's the cruel irony. When you're an avoidant in a relationship with another avoidant, you've built a love story where distance feels safer than closeness. But one day you both wake up and realize that in protecting yourselves from each other, you've also lost each other. In the beginning, it might not even feel like a problem. Avoidant couples often pride themselves on giving each other space. They don't check in constantly, they don't demand daily emotional updates, and they can go hours or even days without speaking and call it healthy independence. But space, when it's not intentional, slowly becomes a wall. And when both people in the relationship default to pulling away instead of leaning in, that wall starts to feel permanent. The first cracks in the connection appear when one person is hurting but doesn't feel safe enough to say so, and the other assumes silence means everything is fine. They don't ask, they don't dig, they just carry on, both assuming they're being respectful, when really they're quietly starving the relationship of intimacy. This moment of realization often arrives in a strange, almost cinematic way. Maybe they're sitting at dinner, not speaking, scrolling through their phones. Maybe they're lying in bed, backs turned, with a cold inch of space between them that feels like miles. Maybe one of them tries to think of the last deep conversation they had and can't remember. And then it hits like a soft but undeniable thud in the chest. We're not close anymore. Avoidants are experts at avoiding that thought for as long as possible. But once it appears, it's hard to shake. The problem is, avoidants are also skilled at convincing themselves it's just a phase, or that things are fine, as long as there's no outright conflict. But deep down, both know something has shifted. When both partners are avoidant, they share an unspoken agreement. Vulnerability is dangerous, emotional neediness is unattractive, and independence is sacred. This works fine when things are easy, but when emotional challenges arise, grief, stress, illness, doubt, there's no one reaching across the emotional divide. Instead, they retreat further into their own worlds. They'll say they're just busy or just tired, but in reality, they're protecting themselves from the discomfort of seeing each other's raw emotions. Over time, these micro-withdrawals stack up until the bond is more like a polite arrangement than a living, breathing love. The moment they realize they're drifting apart is often triggered by contrast. One of them might see another couple laughing in a cafe, leaning across the table to tell each other stories, and feel a pang of something they can't quite name. Or maybe a friend asks how their partner is doing, and they realize they don't actually know. These moments feel small, but they land with weight. They're like emotional Polaroids capturing the distance. Not the physical kind, but the kind where you look at your partner and realize you can't remember the last time you felt truly seen by them. For some avoidant couples, the drift happens so quietly that they only notice when a big life event forces them to face it. A family crisis, a job loss, or even something as simple as one partner wanting more closeness can suddenly expose how far apart they've grown. The request for more intimacy feels threatening to both, not because they don't care, but because closeness has always been the very thing they've avoided. So instead of leaning in, they retreat further, telling themselves they're giving space when they're actually deepening the gap. In these moments, conversations become logistical rather than emotional. They talk about bills, groceries, weekend plans, but not about feelings, fears, or dreams. The deeper emotional currents are left untouched, like a river no one dares to swim in. And so, the relationship starts to feel like a roommate situation, comfortable but emotionally hollow. For many avoidant couples, this is the point where they both feel the ache of absence, but are too afraid to address it. They don't want to risk rejection, so they both silently wait for the other to make a move that never comes. The most heartbreaking part of this dynamic is that avoidants do feel love. They care deeply. They just express it in subtle, indirect ways. A cup of coffee made in the morning, a repaired door hinge, a quiet presence on the couch while watching a show. But when both partners speak love in this unspoken language, and neither speaks in emotional words, it's easy to miss the signals altogether. Love becomes hidden in plain sight, and when the drift begins, these quiet gestures are often mistaken for routine rather than connection. The moment of realization can also be sparked by loneliness that sneaks in even when they're together. An avoidant couple can sit in the same room but feel entirely alone because the emotional bridge between them has crumbled. This isn't just about missing romance, it's about missing the safety of emotional closeness. For avoidance, safety has always been about control and distance. But here's the paradox. When the drift becomes undeniable, they realize that the very distance they built for protection has left them exposed to something far more painful: loss. Some avoidant couples try to fix this drift in small, hesitant ways. One partner might suggest a weekend trip, a date night, or even a casual check-in about how they've been feeling. But because vulnerability feels risky, these gestures are often half-hearted or awkward. If the other partner responds with discomfort, sarcasm, or deflection, the one who reached out retreats even further, confirming the belief that emotional closeness is unsafe. And so, the cycle continues: reach, retreat, repeat. The drift doesn't always mean the end, but for avoidant couples, it can feel like a quiet death. Not a dramatic breakup, but a gradual fading of what once felt alive. They might stay together for years in this state, convincing themselves it's enough because it's calm and predictable. But inside, both may feel a persistent ache, a longing for something more, coupled with the fear of what it might cost to have it. When they finally name the drift out loud, it's often in the form of a question. Do you feel like we're not as close as we used to be? This question can be terrifying for an avoidant because it opens the door to everything they've been avoiding: the possibility of blame, the need for emotional vulnerability, the risk of rejection. But sometimes naming it is the only way to stop the slow slide into emotional isolation. The truth is, avoidant couples don't drift apart because they don't care. They drift apart because caring deeply feels dangerous. And yet, the very moment they realize the drift has happened can also be the moment they have a choice. They can retreat further into the safety of emotional distance, or they can take the terrifying risk of turning toward each other. For avoidance, that choice isn't just about saving the relationship. It's about rewriting the story they've been living their whole lives. The story that says love is safest at arm's length. And maybe, just maybe, the realization that they're drifting apart isn't the end. Maybe it's the beginning of finally understanding that love isn't found in perfectly managing distance, but in daring to close it.